Good morning, everybody. The Housing, Urban Development and Zoning Committee for March 1st, 2022 will be called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis,
Present.
Alderman Cone, Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad,
Here.
Alderwoman Martin,
Present.
Alderman Narayan,
Here.
Alderwoman Evans,
Present.
Chairman Boyd.
Present.
Seven present, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes for February the 24th, 2022.
I move we accept the minutes for February 22,
24th,
Second.
24,
February. Okay.
February 24, 2022.
Okay. It's been moved and
Second.
second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Cone, Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans,
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
By your vote, we've adopted the minutes for February the 24th, 2022. The first board we will discuss this morning's Board Bill 203. Madam Clerk, would you read the summary?
Board Bill 203, introduced by Alderwoman Annie Rice. This ordinance is the amend ordinance number 62124, codified in the revised code of the city of St. Louis as chapter 6.20 pertaining to service contracts to conform with intent and federal statutes direction. The scope and purpose remains intact.
Okay, Alderwoman Rice, you're recognized on Board Bill 203.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee, for the opportunity to bring this board bill in front of you this morning. There are some documents in your Google Drive. If you have a chance to look over there, we do have a couple of amendments, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure if do you want to go ahead and have full discussion? They're fairly minor amendments, just some tweaking on some language. But if you want to discuss the bill in full first and then work on amendments, or what would be your preference?
Yeah, let's discuss the bill in full, then we'll come back to the.
Okay, great. If I could, I have with me here today, Jim Fall is an attorney with Hartnett Reyes Jones, and he represents some of our labor partners. If I could have him join me for a presentation on what we're trying to do here with this bill. He has a PowerPoint he'll be able to move through pretty quickly to explain what it is.
Okay, Mr. Fall, do you promise, affirm, or swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Again, state your name, who you represent, and then proceed.
Yes, my name is Jim Fall. I'm a resident in the 23rd Ward in the city of St. Louis. As an attorney, I represent a number of labor organizations who work and live in the area.
Okay.
All right, and I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation I think might be useful. Am I allowed to share screen on this Zoom?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
you may share.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and there we are. Thank you very much. So what I'm trying to do today, and what this bill is trying to do with the help of Annie Rice and the rest of the honorable board aldermen, is clarify St. Louis's service contract ordinance. This is an ordinance that's already codified in 6.20 chapter. And what it does currently is follows the federal law. There's a Federal Service Contract Act that's been in place since the 60s that's designed to act as a prevailing wage for non-construction contracts. This board is well aware of prevailing wage for construction contracts and has been supportive of those wages for a long time. But there is a there is a federal law called the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act that sets prevailing wages for non-construction contracts. How it works generally is it sets the rate for certain contracted out government functions that the government would already be doing or asking for services by a survey by the Department of Labor, where the secretary sets what the rate is by looking at a survey and finding out what the area is. So St. Louis's is different than Chicago's, is different than Kansas City's. Or if the group that is being serviced, performing the services right now, operate under a collective bargaining agreement, then the wages and the rates contained in that collective bargaining agreement is going to be the rate for when that job goes back out to bid. So for instance, if the airport or civil or city service goes out to bid for an RFP, what the federal statute would do is say, here's the minimum wage that have to be paid for this class of employees, or if that class of employees is currently represented by a collective bargaining agreement, whoever is bidding and responding to that RFP who has to bid on it with the wages and fringe benefits under that collective bargaining agreement. Do not have to accept the collective bargaining agreement, do not have to recognize the union, do not have to hire the same people, but the wages that were negotiated and the fringe benefit wage rates that were negotiated stay in place. The idea is to not use the government's power to lower wages when things go out for RFP. This is the full thing, and we'll get back together. But what the federal law does is it sets a minimum wage and a minimum fringe benefit wage for non-construction work. City of St. Louis has adopted this program back in 1990 for non-construction. And it did so in chapter 6.20. It says that every service contract has to set and the corresponding bills has to contain certain things. Those certain things are the minimum prevailing wage rate to the service contractor and the minimum fringe benefit rate for those service contractors. Again, they don't have to collect a collective bargaining agreement. They don't have to provide fringe benefits, but they have to at least provide the monetary equivalent of what that rate is. We go on to say that when any agency for the city of St. Louis goes out, just like in the federal statute, the city of St. Louis says, go out, the RFPs have to have a provision stating what this minimum prevailing wage for non-construction is and the minimum prevailing wage for fringe benefits are, and that every contract has to have that. Right now, this is happening in the city of St. Louis, where we define the minimum prevailing wage benefits to those paid such employees in the St. Louis metropolitan area pursuant to, and then there's the federal statute. And at the bottom there, it says, again, currently law, that the minimum prevailing wage benefits includes contributions or their cash equivalent. So if I win an RFP, the prior person had some kind of welfare benefit that I don't provide, well, at least the same monetary amount goes to those new employees or to those new, the new contractors' employees. Also have a new fringe benefit that talks about what the fringe benefits are for each class. Now in the federal law, it also has this collective bargaining right that we talked about. This is where this bill comes in, is to clarify the difference. Right now there's a distinction or a question. I don't think it's a legal difference, but I think there's a question that exists when things go out to bid, whether or not the collective bargaining rate has to apply for the city like it does in the federal. And I can show you this by comparing. Right here, for the city, we say such employees pursuant to the federal law. So whatever the RFP, whatever employees are covered by the RFP, those employees have the minimum prevailing wage fringe benefits pursuant to the federal law. But it doesn't go on to say the collective bargaining part that's here. Now, I think as a legal reason, that doesn't matter because such employees pursuant to the federal law would incorporate the collective bargaining rate. However, it doesn't come out and directly say that. So the purpose of this bill is just to kind of relieve that confusion. Same thing with the minimum wages for current law for federal. Again, the state or the city says such employees for minimum wages pursuant to federal law. The federal law says how you determine it per class of employee, or if there's a collective bargaining agreement, then whatever that collective bargaining agreement rate is. Again, don't have to accept the union, don't have to accept the contract. We're only talking about the wages and the whole fringe and the whole wage package being the same. And again, here's the comparison. Again, I believe that for our purposes, since we say in the city currently, such employees pursuant to federal law, that incorporates the collective bargaining rate where there is one. But again, out of an abundance of caution, and because there has been some confusion, we want to just clarify that the city law does the same. So that's what this bill does. It clarifies the ordinance. It gets rid of the confusion between the difference between such employees that we have in the city and classes of employees as the federal law states. And it also gets rid of confusion between such employees that the city ordinance says and the wages determined by the CBA. It does not require any bidding contractor to adopt the collective bargaining agreement. It does not require any bidding contractor to recognize an incumbent union, hire the same people, or apply any non-wage portion of the CBA, such as grievance procedures or seniority rights. It doesn't require anybody to do that. It just says when somebody new is bidding, you have to bid at the same wages that the current people working there get, so that the city doesn't use its market power to lower wages in our area. How it works is going to be very simple. Every couple of years or every couple of months, usually about twice a year, actually, the Department of Labor says, here's what our survey says. So all our folks have to do, and what they do now is say, is this bid that's going out covered by our City Service Contract Act? If the answer is yes, then do the people working there work under a CBA? If they do, then when it goes out to bid, use the CBA rates. If they don't, use the Department of Labor rates that are published a couple times a year. If it's not covered by the Service Contract Act, then we use our city living wage ordinance that everybody is familiar with. It's a small process. All the numbers are readily available either by a CBA, or if there is no CBA, published in the Department of Labor. They just published their last one in December of 2021, so they'll probably be updated this summer. And it breaks it down by occupational title, everything from bike mechanics to maintenance employees to accountants to hairdressers. Even bike mechanics are on there. And so with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. You can stop sharing your screen, please.
Happy to.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions from members of the committee. Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. The explanation was very clear and succinct. We have been hitting and missing at this over the years, and this makes it very clear. And it doesn't harm anybody. What it does is it helps to make sure that there is fair and equitable prevailing wages, whether you are a union bidder or not. Whatever class you are, we shall adopt it appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who has oversight responsibility for this?
Currently,
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderwoman. I'm loath to interrupt an older person, but thank you. Right now, oversight is done in one of three ways. At the bidding portion, just like any bidder can say, hey, I think you have the specs on this project wrong, or hey, your bid spec says you want to do it A, well, am I still responsive if I do it B? That process at the front end is open to any interested party any citizen, and it actually says representatives of the employees to say, hey, bidding agency, be it airport, parks, whoever, I think you have that rate wrong. Please go look at it. Then oversight for the whole contract is done by BPS, because they have to look into to make sure that it's, well, first city councilor make sure that the required requirements for the bid is in there. BPS is there to look to make sure that things are handled the way appropriately and they're being paid per the contract. And then there's also a private right of action for a debarment list if somebody gets the contract and then turns out not to be handling that. Again, like the first protest, there's a protest thing in 620 that is currently available that says how to go through a process to either enforce what the wage is already printed at or debar somebody who willfully and intentionally is not paying the wage that they contracted to do.
But so where does that process get? Is that the city councilor's office? Is that BPS? Who's handling?
It's BPS is my standard. Not is how it's in 620 now, I believe. I don't have a copy of the full chapter in front of me, but I do know that process is already codified in the revised code.
Okay, so I'm just curious. It sounds as though, because typically these issued through BPS, I mean, there might be some outliers, but is BPS supportive of this? Do they have the staff to provide oversight? Have we had those conversations with them?
I can say that I have not had conversations with BPS. I can tell you that the oversight, though, is the same as they already have. The oversight portion of this doesn't change.
I understand. But, frequently in the city, we have ordinances on the books that aren't enforced because we don't have the appropriate or adequate staffing in various city departments. So I'm asking the question because I want to ensure that if this were to pass, that we have the adequate resources to be able to actually do what it says.
Sorry,
So,
Alderman. Yeah, sorry, Alderman Cohn. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I think that this is the law as the law is written. We're just clarifying it under our ordinances. So nothing that BPS does should change on this. What we're giving is clearer guidance if there is a question that arises from a contractor who's bidding or, and the city councilor's office has, there have been conversations with the city councilor's office as well about tightening up this language and making sure that we're following the right procedure here. So I completely understand what you're saying. I don't want to put any more burden on folks. This is already the burden. We're just making our ordinances match.
So I get that, but do we know if BPS currently has the resources to enforce even what's on the books currently, let alone making this clearer for other people? I've been around for a long time, and there's plenty of things that fall through the cracks. So I think it's always important that when we revisit these types of situations, that we have those conversations with the department heads to make sure that they do have those resources in fact in place, and that they're able, because at the end of the day, if we're passing an ordinance saying, we're going to have a non-discrimination policy in place for LGBT people, but then through our budgetary process, we don't fund enforcement capabilities in CREA, it makes no difference because we don't have the capacity to be able to enforce these things. So I'm just curious if there's been a conversation with Rich Bradley or anyone in BPS around whether or not they're actually able to enforce these given the budget that they have in place today.
If I may, I think this gets to the area of your question, doesn't address the question directly, but I think it's important. I am working with the city on another bill that is to tighten up all contracting oversight, be it for prevailing wage, be it for workforce. Be it for the workforce diversity programs to make sure those are being enforced, local preference being enforced, and this portion is in that bill as well. Sarah Martin currently has a bill, but it's probably not going to go anywhere in this session because we're still having those conversations with everybody that's around, to have a omnibus kind of a streamlined enforcement process, because as you correctly pointed out, not only is a budgetary strain an issue, but there's a lot, the question about who actually oversees these things is sometimes not exactly clear. So I do know for a fact that there's talks about that enforcement portion and that oversight portion for everything related to city contracting through another vehicle.
So Alderman Cone, so no, I have not had conversations with BPS about this specifically, because it does not seem to change what our requirements for them were on the front end. But I do agree that it is, I think we are at high, we are very much in time to be boosting their capabilities and their ability to enforce the guidance that we do have on all of those measures that Jim described. And I think Alderwoman Martin has a bill on that, and I'm looking forward to that discussion as we can allocate them some better resources to enforce all of our provisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we're going to excuse Alderman Coulter due to necessary absences for this meeting today. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
My questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Alderman Muhammad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions or comments. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Alderwoman Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, but just sort of as response into Alderman Cone's inquiry in regards to what my bill does that was heard last week. One difference is that the bill that I had is incentivized projects. So they're not the projects executed by the city. And so that is different because that is handled over an SLDC, but BPS has this is already in place. So they're already ensuring contracts executed by the city with government money rather than developers receiving incentives. They're already tracking those and making sure that our standards are already set. So I personally haven't talked to Rich Bradley or BPS about this measure, but this does seem like it's just ensuring that we are that we all understand the standards and the base level rather than creating new enforcement, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor of this legislation, please. And I have no questions.
Alderwoman Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions at this time.
Okay, I have a few questions. So has there been an issue that have come about that created some ambiguity in the awardance of a contract to prompt us to want to do this?
I'm aware that there's been some ambiguity for some time. It came to my attention a couple of summers ago. You all may remember there was a job that was bid out at the airport regarding the baggage handling mechanics work. I don't know if you recall that or not. And the folks that had that contract for a long time had an agreement with a labor organization. And when it went out to bid, the bids came back, and one of the low bidders had bid the job at not the wages under the service contract or under the collective bargaining rate, but under the city's living wage ordinance rate, which was significantly lower than the collective bargaining rate. And I believe, although I don't remember offhand, I believe lower than what the service contract rate would be. Now that issue ended up not going anywhere, not coming to a head, because the incumbent contractor retained that contract for other reasons. But that sparked a conversation with the, not only amongst my client, but the city and the city councilor's office. And we said, well, I didn't think there was any ambiguity, obviously somebody did, and I don't get to decide what's ambiguous or not. So the idea was to, let's say, just clarify this, you know, if this is how the feds do it. We think that was the intent. I believe that's how it's worked in the past, although I don't know I can't point to a situation because it didn't come to my attention until this issue. But we thought, let's go ahead and clarify that so that we don't get into a dispute down the road, that it's just clarified and everybody knows the rules going forward.
And when you say making the ordinances match, can you explain that again? What is that?
Yes.
Mean? What we match?
Certainly. So make our ordinance match with the federal, the Federal Service Contract Act. So where our ordinance didn't say, or with collective bargaining agreement, it did say the wages for such employees pursuant to federal law, then cited the federal statute. And so there's a question saying, well, does that mean also the collective bargaining rate? And my position was, well, yes, you have to look at such employees as the feds would. And they said, right, but since it doesn't exactly say collective bargaining, there's agreement rate, there's some ambiguity. And so the idea is to say, let's get rid of that ambiguity.
Okay. I just have a little anxiety based on some my colleagues from the 25th said. I need to have a better understanding of how all of this work. I think it would be helpful if BPS could be here to kind of walk us through their process to be able to address some of the questions that the Alderman from the 25th had. I thought they were pretty valid questions. And I do clearly understand, Alderman from the 8th, that we're just trying to make it clear, but just to be, you know, helpful for me to understand the process, because I didn't know that there was a potential issue out there. So I would really want to know, how are we handling these situations today? Have somebody been passed over unfairly or treated unfairly? So I think, you know, there's good intent with this, but I would really like to talk to the Board of Public Service and even maybe the director of the airport, because most of these contracts probably impact the airport. Would that be a fair assumption?
That would be my assumption because there's such a large institution, but quite frankly, Alderman, you'd be in a better position to know that than me.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud, and I can talk to the airport director as well, because City Hall is pretty much civil service employees. We have our own janitors or whatever they call them, and you know, to do a lot of that service work. So I'm just assuming that most of those contracts are going to the airport. So I would really like to have some more conversation with them as well. And another question is, so if there was an independent, well, all of them independent. So if there was a contractor who was bidding on some services at the airport, what our ordinances right now is saying that you must pay prevailing wage, right?
Correct. You have to pay either the living wage ordinance, or if it's something that would fall under the 620, the prevailing wage as determined under 620. Correct. Okay.
And the collecting bargaining piece is a whole separate piece, right? So go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That's the question, and I think it's not a separate piece, because under the federal statute, what it says is, here is what is determined to be the prevailing wage rate. But if those folks are represented by a collective bargaining agreement, then it's the collective bargaining rate. If they're not, so for instance, if let's say I have I'm a owner and or a contractor, and I have a 3-year contract with a labor organization. And in the first year, my people make $10 an hour. And then I have 2 more years on the collective bargaining agreement, but it goes out for RFP. If the city prevailing wage says it's $9 an hour, and Alderman Boyd, you come in and say, the city prevailing wage says I only have to pay people on this job $9 an hour. What this would say is, no, that's the prevailing wage, but since they've bargained at arm's length to say $10 an hour, and next year $10.25 and next year $10.50, then when Alderman Boyd bids on that project, he may very well do it, but the men and women who are working there will either not make any less than they've already been promised, or the people replacing them won't be making less as an incentive to get rid of those folks. Those folks you don't have to hire the people that I employed, but whoever you hire is making 10, 1025, 1050, so that those individuals aren't hurt.
Right, so
Why
it's the
would-
higher of the two wages.
The higher of the
So
two.
Right.
Right, so we're trying to say if there's been a negotiated agreement that is a higher, well, and this is what the federal statute says, that you just pay more what is there, so that a bargaining process or an RFP process through the city doesn't lower wages for folks. So because you can bargain above the prevailing wage, I guess there could be a situation where a union would bargain better benefits in the long run that would be potentially be lower than I don't think it would happen, but it could, ostensibly maybe could happen, but we're always going to take the higher of what is there. So if for some reason a contract was in place and the prevailing wage has moved past that, you would pay the higher prevailing wage.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. But going back to the collective bargaining agreement, why would we accept a contract with a contractor that has a collective bargaining agreement that exceeds the length of the contract? That I don't understand that.
It's a separate thing. I don't know that does happen. I don't know how often it happens. If I was an employer, I would want my collective bargaining agreement to end at the time my RFP ends. But the city, I don't think is involved in that. I think the idea is just that the men and women working there, whoever gets that contract, whether it's the incumbent contractor or it's a new contractor, then it's not done at the expense of lowering the wages. Like I said, you don't have to recognize the union, you don't have to take the contract, just that it's not done at the expense of lowering the wages for the men and women doing that job.
Right. But in a capitalistic society, and when people are bidding for services, it's not unusual for somebody to competitively bid and take a contract away from the current provider because they do pay lower wages. I mean, that just happens. That's just doing business. So we're putting short pants on people in the bidding process because we're saying you absolutely, when you make this bid, you have to pay at least what the people are currently being paid, right? Am I hearing that right?
Well, I would say if the city of St. Louis has massive market power, and if the city, because it says lets out massive amounts of contract, and if the city of St. Louis finds it in its best interest to use that market power to lower the wages of people that live and work in the city, it certainly has the ability to do that. The purpose of 620, which is already on the books, and the purpose of the federal statute is to say, in a capitalist society, if you're going to come and underbid somebody, then it should be done in a way that's innovative and efficient rather than on the backs of the men and women that are actually doing the work. But it's free for the city to do what it wants. If the city wants to use its power to lower wages, it's happy to. If the city wants to use its power to maintain wages at the level that have been negotiated or the average wage as the Department of Labor has determined, and as is currently the law, then it's free to do that as well.
Mr. Fall, I'm not sure it's fair to say that if the city is willing to lower people's wages. I don't think that's fair. When we bid contracts are bidded with a lot of metrics, right? Just like the trades contracts. And so I don't think it's fair to say if the city wants to lower wages. That is not what the city is in the business of doing. I think what the city is in the business of doing is making sure that we look out for the taxpayer at the end of the day. I think that's very important. It's very critical. So they wouldn't have to raise taxes and do other things. This has been very helpful for me. We're not going to take a vote on this today. I want to have some more discussion. I would like to have the president of BPS come in and talk. I would also like to have the director of the airport come out and talk. So let me work on rescheduling another hearing for this, and so that we can have Yes, Alderwoman.
I was just going to ask, we do have a member of the public here to testify on the bill
You're-
today. And just quickly, because the amendments are so minor and we've already got them in the drive, if we could just walk quickly through those amendments and adopt those, then that way, when we bring in the BPS and airport, we're discussing the bill as it will go forward. Would that be acceptable?
We're not going to hear the amendments today, but we will. Thank you for bringing up the public comments. I had that to not miss it, but I got a good clerk behind me, so she watches my back. So thank you for reminding me to do that. Let's see. Would that be Jameson Ramirez?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
All right. Mr. Ramirez, do you promise, affirm, or swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, so again, state your name for the record, who you represent.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Boyd and members of the committee. My name is Jameson Ramirez. I'm a strategic researcher for the Service Employees International Union, Local 1.
Go ahead, proceed, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for affording me this opportunity to address the committee this morning. This is a great discussion, and it is bringing some thoughtful thinking to this important issue. SEIU Local 1 proudly represents nearly 50,000 working people in 6 states and 11 cities across the Midwest, including, I would add, 1,100 essential workers in St. Louis. And in these pandemic times, working folks can appreciate the fundamental advantage of a paycheck that recognizes their essential labor with a fair and living wage. But let's not forget that this is not just about wages. As was brought up earlier in the discussion, workers will also recognize the game-changing impact of receiving benefits that shield them when they are sick, give them the ability to find time off, to reset and recalibrate when they're exhausted, enable them to close out their working years with dignity when they are ready to retire. I would just highlight a recent study from the SHIFT Project, a collaboration between researchers at Harvard and the University of California, San Francisco. They found that among workers in the service sector, only 8%, let me repeat that, 8% of workers surveyed could take paid time off if they caught COVID and had to quarantine. When the majority of workers are left vulnerable to the forces of a pandemic or worse, economic forces that could exploit their labor, we are all left vulnerable. It is our position that Board Bill 203 complements the important worker protections codified in Chapter 620 and will ensure that no wages be set to an unlivable minimum or benefits or their monetary equivalent be left off the table because of loopholes or the lack of consistent enforcement of current statute. Enabling workers to flourish so that our communities flourish isn't just good economics, it's good social policy. And labor understands that good social policy creates a tide that lifts all boats. And this committee is in a powerful position, in our view, to shape that policy. It's my hope that this committee will give this bill a due pass recommendation so that good policy go to work for our workers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for your input. All right, we're gonna hold this to the next meeting and we're gonna move on to Board Bill 206. Madam Clerk, would you go ahead and read the summary of Board Bill 206, please?
Board Bill 206, introduced by Alderman Tom Oldenburg. The proposed bill would amend Ordinance 71345, commonly referred to as the City St. Louis Annual Operating Plan for Fiscal Year 2021-2022 by the addition of a new line, Police Department Real-Time Crime Center, and amend Ordinance Number 71393 to reappropriate 2.5 million of the 5 million of the 2021 coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds appropriated to the police department for the police department overtime to the Real Crime Center.
Okay, Alderman Oldenburg, you are recognized on Board Bill 206. Oh, by the way, just to let the public know, we did hear this bill last week for the opportunity for public comment. And so we won't be taking public comment, nor did anyone sign up today because we did have that portion. There was a need to have our subject matter experts today to talk about this bill. Our Chief John Hayden, and our esteemed Public Safety Director, Dr. Dan Isom, formerly Chief Isom. So excited to see you guys and hear from you. But again, Alderman Oldenburg, you're recognized on Board Bill 206.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a committee substitute. Would it be appropriate to place that in front of the committee members before we get started?
Absolutely. Let's make sure I see that. Give me a quick second.
I can certainly also explain the mechanics and the nature of why the committee sub is being introduced too.
Okay. 206 committee substitute. Okay. I move to put Board Bill 206 committee substitute before the committee. Entertain a second.
Second.
Okay, been moved in second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderwoman, thank you, Alderwoman Martin, Alderman Ryan,
Aye.
Alderwoman Evans,
Aye.
Chairman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Martin. 7 aye votes.
So now what's before is Board Bill 206 committee substitute. Alderman Oldenburg, please proceed on the committee substitute. Talk us through the changes and what we're trying to accomplish.
Excellent. Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak briefly around, of course, this committee sub, and then just give some context to the mechanics of this, what we're trying to achieve, the virtue in it that I hope you will all see. And then I do want to let the chief and the safety director, public safety director, speak perhaps in that order, because I do know the chief has a hard stop about 10:30, 10:40. So I want to make sure that he can get to the rest of his day, and I appreciate his valued time. Additionally, Paul Payne is present should there be any technical questions specifically around items spent to date. So very quickly, this committee substitute really just changes and makes it a simple reappropriation within Board Bill 2 or Ordinance 71393. Before the original board bill, we were tinkering with the budget, the annual operating plan, and that just didn't seem as simplified as to what we were trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is effectively give resources that feel like they're going to be unused or not being encouraged to be used to, instead of fulfilling police overtime, radio cars, more folks on the street. We can utilize, we know there's needed resources for the real-time crime center. So this is really keeping all the cash that was originally appropriated in Board Bill 2, $5 million worth of overtime within the police department, but calling for a reappropriation of half of that to be spent on cameras, particularly about 300 cameras and any network or fiber upgrades that are needed that hasn't already been done. The reasoning for this was, if you all recall, back when we were negotiating and working on the last year's fiscal budget, the mayor's office cut 98 uniformed positions, funded but vacant uniform positions. Now, historically, we have always done that in the budget, if you guys recall, because that helped balance the overspend of overtime. Overtime had, for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, have been on a historical trend of overspending. Because that also was utilized, overtime, as you all know, utilized to keep us up to our fighting weight and the fighting strength of the police department. So with that 98 positions of vacant funded cut, I believe through negotiations in the spirit of cooperation, $5 million was restored through Amendment 12 in that HUD's committee that then went on and passed Board Bill 2 for that appropriation. There's 4 months left in the fiscal year. That $5 million has been untapped. And I believe, and again, this can be corroborated later in testimony by Paul Payne, but to date, we're $1.4 million unspent on police overtime. So really, the virtue of this board bill is to hopefully get some answers to the question of what has changed with the trend that we've constantly seen of overspending of overtime over the last decade. And if we're not going to utilize it for manpower, let's grab a half of it and put it to where we know there are real needs in the real-time crime center. So from an efficiency standpoint, I think we can all agree that what a great job the real-time crime center does. It solves 2 violent crimes per day on average, and it's solved over 1,800 serious. It's led to 1,800 serious arrests for felonies and the like since its inception. So I think all the work that's done in that department is very laudable. And I know for a couple of years now, there's been a need to get it some more cameras and more equipment. So that's the virtue behind this, is to really get some resources that look like they're going to be unspent, but can remain housed in the police department to the real-time crime center, all staying within the construct of the police department. I think we can go to our speakers now, Mr. Chairman, if it suits you.
Who would you like to go first?
I think the chief probably, just because I know he has time constraints.
Okay, Chief, you're recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Chairman. I think what I'll focus on is directly on the specific request, and then of course I'll be willing to answer any questions that anyone may have. But basically, we're requesting 200 license plate readers, and then 100 dual pan tilt zoom cameras. There's also included some network service upgrading for new devices, which comes to another 400,000, and then network switch fiber equipment. So I'll talk a little bit about how we would utilize that. So again, 200 license plate readers, 100 dual pan tilt zoom cameras, which are our fixed cameras, and then a network service upgrade, and then network switch fiber equipment. I think it's important to discuss the fiber equipment at times, because I think sometimes there's a belief that we can put cameras at all intersections. Some of the infrastructure and fiber networking is not as full at all intersections. So sometimes that's a challenge. And so I just want to make that a point of reference. So how will we break down, how will we use those 200 license plate readers and 100 dual pan tilt zoom cameras? So if we start out with existing deployment, so naturally there's wear and tear, there's environmental, rain, and there's weather that takes its toll on our cameras. Some of them are at end of life. Some of them are, of course, at intersections, and that if somebody has an accident in an intersection and wipes out all of the electricity at the intersection because they ran into the light pole or what have you, that also has an impact on our ability for that camera to be useful. So 30 LPRs and 15 pan tilt zoom will be used to replace existing technology deployments. And then 70 would be to build up on existing or limited technology that already exists. So 70 LPRs and then 40 pan tilt zoom cameras will be for places where there's limited technology that we will be able to add to that. And then finally, we will reserve 100 LPRs and 35 pan tilt zooms for areas encountering violent crime. And just some examples, when you'd have an uptick, if you have a series of locations that continuously has violent crime, we would love to have cameras in those areas. Anytime, as law enforcement officials, anytime you hear about an incident like shots about to go off, and then somebody's running down the street or driving a car erratically at a certain location, we certainly wish in all those instances that there would be surveillance available. And again, I'm talking about intersections. I know sometimes we get into the privacy concerns, But again, you know, there are no expectations of privacy at any privacy at any intersection. I mean, whatever behavior that one is doing at an intersection, I don't think that there is any expectation on that person's part that there's some privacy there, and that's what we're talking about, intersections. The places where there have been upticks, and several alderpersons on the line have called me about different locations where they see continued activity, they see continued what appears to be drug activity, or what appears to be ongoing violence at various intersections. So again, we'd like to build up in some of those areas. We'd like to build up some networking, some infrastructure where it's only limited. We want to replace some older of the equipment, and then we want to, as violent crime peaks in certain locations, we want to put cameras in those locations as well. Hey, well, I would love to be able to say, and then of course, you know, we've had discussions about smart city surveillance. You know, there are some cities, major cities across the country, that you cannot do anything that's not recorded if it's in open space, if it's in places where there's no expectation of privacy. You cannot commit, you know, major crimes or violent crimes and it go unsurveilled. And so again, I'm trying to talk about the ability to have technology be a force multiplier for us. When you know, we've always talked about, you can't have a police officer on every corner. Certainly the camera with surveillance on these intersections or at these intersections will be very helpful to our focus on violent crime.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, that's all I have, Alderman Chairman, unless people have questions of what I said already.
Sure, we're gonna ask questions. Let me ask the good doctor if he had anything he wanted to add, or if he's just here for support.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, alderpersons. The only thing I would add is certainly the network upgrades and the fiber and replacement of cameras is something that would be needed. And when I talked to Alderman Oldenburg, I did though talk about taking more time to map out our network of cameras and LPRs. So we have a more coordinated plan. Certainly, as the chief said, some of that will be just dictated by the activity that's going on in the area. But you know, if we're building out a network, we really want a plan to see, you know, citywide, so we don't have just sporadic placing of cameras in different areas. So, I mean, what I would suggest as a community is that we initiate a study to kind of figure out what will this camera and LPR network look like, recognizing that some of it could just be based on citizen contact, but a lot of it is based on what kind of total system do we want to build. And I think that will take time to do and take some funding to do that analysis.
Okay, let's go around and ask members of the committee if they have any questions. Let's see here. Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, and I thank the chief and our public safety director for being present today.
Okay, Alderman Cone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious. I have a number of cameras and LPRs in the 25th ward that in some cases border other wards as well. They've been on and offline, you know, functionally speaking, for a while now. Trying to get them replaced or repaired has been a challenge. Obviously, it comes out of ward capital money. So is the intent of this, like, we won't have to pay for ward capital money for these repairs and replacements now?
Certainly, Alderman Cone, that would be at least in part the intent. You know, that would be helpful. You know, what I didn't mention was the fact that some of the cameras or the police department actually owns only a fraction of that. For example, the police department owns, there's 702 city-owned cameras, and then I'm talking about pan tilt zoom cameras, and then there's 173 of those owned by the city. And so even though they're federated into the real-time crime center, our access to them has to go through, we talk about repairs, our access has to go through the city IT section. And sometimes there are challenges with access to those. So I agree with you. I think that part of the intent is to make sure that the cameras are operating properly, and that we don't have major damages or instances where we would talk about cameras being down for long periods of time.
Okay, so just for my own clarity here, so the cameras that we installed in at least the 25th ward, I can't speak for others. I mean, they're the box, double-headed PTZ. They've got the police department logo on them. Are those department cameras or are those city cameras then?
That would be absolutely be department cameras.
Okay, I mean, I know for a fact that they're mapped into RTC, but I feel like we've got probably 6 of those, and then at least on streets, intersections, and then one that's in one of our neighborhood parks that's been a challenge as well. Okay, I mean, so those would then be included then, I would imagine, if they're part of the department, inventory. So if that's the case, are we also talking about putting more of these in while building out the fiber, or are we just talking about building out fiber for the potential of having ward capital pay for additional cameras?
Yeah, I think it'll be a combination of the two. We would definitely, again, in some instances, replace some of those that have been plagued by weather and other technological challenges, and then of course we would build new ones in certain locations.
Okay, so is this targeted for a particular area, or is this citywide? I can very much speak for at least my area of the 1st district and part of the 3rd, because my ward kind of borders both, particularly right around Merrimack and Grand. But we have, and I've gotten great feedback from the department in terms of the cameras on Grand and the LPR that's on Grand that, hit or miss when it's working. But, there's just, even yesterday, I had a rolling gun battle up the 4600 block of Virginia. I mean, I heard at least, I was on my back porch and heard, several different weapons that were going off from different directions. It's been frustrating to say the least, but even getting cameras, the mobile camera stations that have I guess they're connected to Wi-Fi or whatever, are those included in this as well, or are these just hardwired?
This is the mobile cameras aren't included in this. We just for the sake of budgetary. In other words, we removed, it was about 18 mobile trailers that were a part of this that would have been to the tune of a little over $2 million. So we excluded that.
Okay.
I think that's part of another piece that the Director of Public Safety is working on. Okay.
And from a fiber perspective, are you all just talking about upgrading fiber where it exists or laying new fiber? I'll use Virginia as an example, but Virginia has 7,000 cars per day that go up and down it. It's a very busy road. It has the number 73 line for the bus route, and then it just has tons of pedestrian traffic on it. So when a shootout like yesterday happens, I mean it's heard and felt, and I'm shocked that there weren't any fatalities with just the amount of gunfire that I heard on a very busy stretch of that street. But there's not one traffic signal for about 15 blocks of Virginia. So, or actually probably longer than that. It's just the 15 blocks that are in my ward. So there's no fiber there. right? Because there's no signals. And so my understanding is that fiber mostly exists where there's, the signal boxes, for traffic signals and whatnot. Are we talking about building out new where there's, a lot of criminal activity? Or is this just upgrading and building out where there's already existing fiber?
Yes, sir. It would be both. And I think it kind of points back to what Dr. Isom recommended earlier, in that to make sure this deployment is the most efficient, a study would be in order. In other words, we can talk about, there's probably plenty of places that could benefit from, but again, it does have limitations. And so even with this amount of cameras, it'll have limitations, and the best deployment will probably absolutely come by way of some type of survey. Of course, naturally, a lot of automatic input as to what would be the best locations. And in some instances, if we'd have to build something out, we would try to build that out with the resources that have been funded for this.
Okay.
Yeah, Alderman Cohen, I think that's the type of analysis that we need. I mean, it may sound like these are a lot of cameras and LPRs, but when you're talking about every automatic ward, we need to really have a concrete criteria for how we're going to deploy these to get the most effective use of them. And so while, it's good to say we're going to purchase 200 this or 100 of that, without a plan, we're not going to get out of it what we need. And so you're right. So Virginia, how many do we need on Virginia? How many do we need on Grand? How far should they be spaced? What's the reason why we're putting it on there? Does it have fiber, or do we need cellular connection to get it going? These are a lot of questions that need to be asked and answered. And when you're talking about a citywide network, we really need a thorough analysis, so we're not, just simply throwing money at something.
I look forward to that analysis.
Do too, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. I know probably a ton of my colleagues have questions as well. I'll reserve any questions for later, allow them the opportunity to ask. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief and Director as well.
I want to thank the Chief and Dr. Isom for being here and to answering our questions. And I have spoken to a lot of policemen in regards to this, and so they kind of brought me clarity in regards to it's not replacing the police, it's just giving you all tools to help you to do your job better. But what Alderman Cone is saying is the same situation we have on West Florissant, because we don't have the fiber optics to be able to do the cameras and stuff in that area. And that stretch is the busiest stretch that we have. So I'm glad that we're looking at doing research to see really what I'm hearing Dr. Isom said. You're doing an audit to kind of see what's the needs are and what cameras need to be upgraded. And I'm happy about that. I just want to make sure that, as Alderman Cone said, we're experiencing the same thing. It's ironic because my residents, when they see those cameras, they'll call me because I've reached out to Major Coons and to Chief Hayden and say they're not flashing. So that's letting me know the residents are monitoring those cameras. And so we have incidents within our ward, and the first thing they'll say, well, the cameras were flashing, so they must have picked stuff up. So that's a cushion for them. And it's helped the police department a lot in our area because those cameras have picked up stuff that we normally wouldn't be able to know about or get the information. So thank you all for coming and enlightening us and giving us information. And I just think that the audit is good because then, as Dr. Isom said, we're not just throwing money out the window. We're trying to make sure that we put money in the right places to address the issues. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Director of Public Safety and the Chief for their time. I have no questions or comments.
Okay. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Narayan.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Isom and Chief Hayden, I just want to know, what will the real-time cameras, or how will the real-time cameras address the infractions that I see happening on a daily basis of people speeding down throughout the neighborhood? Will the cameras catch the license plates of these individuals, or is that what they're there for? I'm just trying to figure out, how can we reduce the ruthless speeding that's seen throughout the community? Will these cameras help curb that activity?
Alderwoman, yes, they will help with the assistance of our deployment of traffic officers as well. So, we had the issue with the cameras, with the red light cameras, so which is all tied into it as well. And so the cameras will definitely allow us to track people that are driving erratically. But as far as actually summoning those persons, we'll have to put either traffic officers, officers with speed detection, and or the ability to actually issue a summons. So the presence of the cameras helps slows it down, but also we'll have to reinforce that with the presence of traffic officers to issue summonses.
So physically, the traffic officers have to be there, or are you just saying, okay, the license plate readers can, I don't know if they can determine how fast these drivers are going? Do those cameras do that?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
So
in other words, we won't be able to send a summons to somebody if you were driving. You'll certainly be able to catch if you're driving erratically. The speed will have to be monitored by some type of speed device, speed surveillance.
Okay, because that's a problem. The speeding. I mean, you think they were at the Indianapolis 500, and it's dangerous. It causes accidents, may cause other people to have accidents. And I just want to see that curtailed, if it could be.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Let me go to some members that's not on the committee. I'm going to recognize Alderwoman Gracia, and then Alderwoman Annie Rice and Brandon Bossy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question for the Alderman from the 16th. Could you explain, it looks like there's a handout in the Google Drive with a Hampton Corridor project in it. Is that something that you're hoping will be a part of this funding?
Good question. No, Alderwoman, I put that in there for a point of reference. So 2 years ago, 2.5, almost 3 years ago now, gosh, we did a private fundraise effort to get about 19, 20, 21 cameras throughout the 23rd, the 12th, the 16th wards. And I just put that in to utilize how quickly the intelligence division was able to put an analysis together where the most strategic position would be for these cameras. We basically said, we want to raise money. We know these cameras cost, somewhere between, call it $4,000 to $8,000, depending again where fiber is and the type of camera and the licensees, et cetera. And we put it to them, and within couple of weeks, they turned this analysis around and said, you can't just keep it in the 16th Ward or the 12th Ward. We've got a network here and a net. So I really just threw that in there as an example and I'm glad I got a question on it so I could speak to it, Alderwoman.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No further questions.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Bosley.
Thank you. I appreciate Dr. Iceman, the chief, being here. Thank you, Alderman from the 17th. Man, this is extremely cool. I think it's very important for our city, for security. Quick question for, I guess, whoever can answer it, as far as, I guess, the chief, Dr. Iceman, Alderman Oldenburg. Are there any thoughts on making sure that we put a camera in every park in the city?
Well, I'll take a stab at that one. Certainly, not every park has had some of the challenges as each park has, and certainly we have really worked hard with the alderpersons on parks that have had some challenges. All of them have not, and so we have not focused on surveillance work in those parks that haven't had any challenges that were brought to our attention by the alderpersons.
Okay, and that's just a question, because I know most parks that I would hope have, just because they're parks, the larger ones, of course, maybe have access to like fiber optics, depending on where they are. But, those are places that people commonly play in, all the residents. So it's kind of just one of those common things where we all can kind of hit the community at one time. It's something we all get to feel. At least we know our kids get to go outside and enjoy the parks, and we can, maybe see what's going on if something was to happen, for sure that our officers are able to respond and go back and take a look at how things conspire. So just a thought as far as securing the parks, common areas where we all will be, because I know, once again, like you said, 200 cameras, that really isn't, it's a lot, of course, and I appreciate the idea of a study. I know that most certainly, will be helpful in strategically being able to place them. Are there any thoughts also about being able to put them at every entrance and exit throughout the city? Can we, maybe if that hasn't been a thought, can we add that in to see how many exits and entrances we have throughout the city? And that's, off the highways, going from, stretches the city limits north to south and west. Well, easterly, of course, also, but how many cameras we would actually use to be able to put our city in kind of a protected zone, where when we are looking for individuals, they've shot, people of interest, repeat offenders, we can tap those license plates in and they ding the cameras whenever they enter the city limits. Therefore, a chase doesn't necessarily happen. So just looking at, kind of way we can touch everybody to some degree, and that could cover, I guess the whole city. It wouldn't be necessarily in each ward, but particularly, we all would have the potential to, have ourselves affected by those cameras. So, has that been a thought at all?
Yes, sir, Alderman. I think that's, like, again, pointing to what Dr. Iceman has recommended. I think that a lot of that'll come up in the study, and of course, naturally, again, with only 200 license plate readers and 100 fixed cameras, there's going to be limitations. So that, not every single area of concern won't be covered. I think what the study will show, though, is that the most dangerous areas will be the focus.
Understood. Well, I appreciate that. Once again, I appreciate you all. And I just want to add one more thing. It'd be cool if we can look into, kind of some face. Some people definitely not gonna like this, but some facial recognition stuff, kind of around our parks, a little bit around downtown where we got a lot of break-ins and stuff at. A lot of things, or you got repeat offenders doing the same thing. We got technology out here that can identify folks, and we can kind of move forward. But just throwing it out there. Once again, I appreciate you all. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to go to Alderwoman Rice next, but the colleagues that are on, so I don't miss anybody, would you raise your hand for me if you would like to ask a question? I know I see Alderman Gunther. I think I saw Shameen Hubbard, but people kind of go in and out. I'm on my iPad, so I'm gonna, see. Thank you, Alderman Page. Alderwoman Annie Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what the bill does, because the Alderman Oldenburg, the bill itself is allocating the $2.5 million to the Real-Time Crime Center, and there's not a direct attachment to the bill that specifies that it's for a specific number of cameras, but there's a handout that lists the 200 LPRs, the 100 PTZs, and then network and fiber install upgrades. So is that an attachment to the bill? Is that a is that the allocation? That's where it's going to go, or we're potentially going to use this 2.5 on the study that Dr. Isom was describing?
No, the handout's not an attachment to the bill. It's just simply supplemental materials that's listing what they are. I mean, effectively, it's $5 million was going to the police department. There's an exhibit that showed police department.
Right.
We're basically saying same account, police department, but we're inserting the words real-time crime center to allow for $2.5 million to ensure that they can purchase this equipment and make those technological upgrades.
Okay, but it's not a requirement that this money be used along those specific guidelines of the 200 and the 100. You know what I'm saying? So like normally when we sort of line item it out.
Yeah, I think from a matter of the words, yes, it's for the real-time crime center, and there's supplemental material saying that they would utilize it for equipment purchase. I mean, at the moment now, the police department, from an operations standpoint, their operating budget covers the staff at the real-time crime center. So if there was this infusion of cash to the real-time crime center, the assumption would be it's for the equipment that they're asking for.
Okay, and so the study that we've been talking about is still sort of a hypothetical. It is not funded. Are we doing that?
Well, I don't know. Well, you know, what I will say is I'm certainly will entertain that appropriating dollars to the public safety directors, you know, oversight in addition to the real-time crime center can jumpstart an analysis of where to best put these. I think if you called the folks who run the intelligence divisions and the chief, they could find a place for 300 cameras. We know that at least 30% of them need to be repaired or replaced. So part of this money would immediately probably utilize those, or utilize that use. And then additionally, I think buying the cameras in concert with any of the fiber and upgrades could probably be, again, I mentioned just, 20 cameras. They turned around an analysis of where to best place those in 2 weeks for the private fundraise effort I referenced earlier to the inquiries of the Alderwoman from the 6th. So I'm happy to maybe in a floor substitute, address the need for an analysis to ensure these are getting put in the areas that A, are going to work, and B, are in the areas that we know will help solve crimes and or deter crimes.
Sure.
So the plan is not the cost of the plan. I don't know if there is a cost of the plan or if that can be something done in-house. But I do know that we got one of the best intelligence divisions in the country. So my guess is that analysis can all be done through the course of their normal operations.
Okay, I think that's helpful to clarify because we know, I guess we know where current cameras are. So it might be helpful at some point, maybe going forward in a further discussion with Public Safety Committee or something, to describe where the broken cameras are that need to be replaced, and then which ones are going out. And then we can kind of get a map of sort of citywide where these things going, because the conversation has always been, there hasn't been fiber in areas where folks wanted, where folks have allocated board capital money over the years to put in cameras and that type of thing. So I think it's just always a part of that bigger discussion of where are we putting these things and what reasoning is leading to that. So I don't know that necessarily needs to be a part of your bill, but I think maybe going forward as we continue to discuss how best surveillance works with our community, that we be very transparent about it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Alderwoman. I think, look, we're looking to directly appropriate resources to surveillance equipment. So I do think, and I would have no problem drafting a resolution, or even, again, amending something here to ensure that, look, if we're dedicating resources to the real-time crime center, let's have them come back and report to the Public Safety Committee quarterly, twice a year, probably. To talk to us about the progress, talk to us about how these cameras are actually working, how they're impacting and benefiting citizens in their daily lives. And moreover, that, that they have this analysis or this plan of that they're in the right spot. And I think as elected officials, we want to hear that and get that report. Very similar to what the Environmental Investigation Unit just did for the public safety. It was a very comprehensive annual report that, I think gave us a lot of information. So yeah, I'd commit to that for sure. I'd commit to making sure that we're all aware of that.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to ask questions,
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
You're welcome. Alderman Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Hayden and Dr. Isom for joining us today. My question is related, but in a little bit different direction. I think all of us know there are huge numbers of unregistered, unlicensed, improperly registered, no registration at all vehicles motoring around the city of St. Louis. I've talked with numerous of my fabulous Fifth Ward constituents who were hit by drivers who had absolutely no insurance, liability insurance at all, which really put those people in a pinch. I'm curious to know if there's any comment that you can make publicly without compromising police operations. I'd like to know if these license plate readers and other, like the pan tilt zoom cameras, can they assist in identifying cars that have out-of-date plates, out-of-date temporary tags, fake temporary tags, no license plates at all? Can this technology assist in enforcing the registration and licensing of vehicles using the technology without an actual traffic officer being involved?
Alderman Page, I think the key word is assist. Yes, they can assist with that process. Sometimes, there are ways which you can kind of actually read the temporary tag number. Sometimes you cannot. Again, so if I let's say I was able to find a car and identify a car that and by description, there's other descriptors on the car other than just dents and what have you. I mean, sometimes we can see all of that very clearly. And so I think to answer your question, it can assist. Can we in fact go all the way with just that? It'll be very challenging. Can I identify a car, realize that it's improperly registered, and then of course if the improper registration will probably not point to a location, but I guess if I see that car all the time, I could certainly we certainly can have some enforcement around that, stopping that car, if you will, doing a traffic stop on that car. But I think the key is that if there are dozens of cars passing through one intersection and that didn't have the proper registration, it would be very challenging to do a lot of follow-up issuing of summonses. But it can assist. But it can assist. It can assist.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that I bring this to your attention on behalf of my constituents who constantly bring it to my attention. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Isom, when you talk about this study, is that going to be, you think, in-house or external?
I mean, I would prefer for it to be external for a number of different reasons. I don't dispute what Alderman Oldenburg said, that we have a very good intelligence unit and real-time crime center. But, to date, I don't know that we have a good sense of the mapping of all the cameras, whether police cameras or city cameras, how they are spaced throughout the city, and that to include the LPRs too. So while it may sound good to have our current intelligence unit, they have a lot of different responsibilities that they have ongoing right now. And to place upon them the other task of doing a citywide analysis of our LPR camera network, I would prefer to use some of that money to do a independent, not independent, but contract out with someone to assist with putting that together. I mean, ideally, we should be able to go to a map. I should today and be able to know where every LPR and camera is. I haven't seen that yet, and maybe it's out there, but it hasn't been presented to me.
Dr. Isom, let me ask you a ridiculous question. Have you requested it?
Yeah, and they do know where I think every camera is, but I don't know if it's well organized into a place where I could just go and touch it and say, okay, this is where every camera is. So, but I do, and that's not the fault of anyone who's not doing their job. The officers, intelligence unit, the police department are placing places they think are best at the moment. But when you're placing something in isolation and not looking at the whole network, I don't think it's a good process.
Sure. Wow, let me ask you this. How long do you think it would take for the Real-Time Crime Center to produce a map that shows where every LPR or what all the different camera devices are?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Chair, Mr. Chair, but as I said, I mean, the intelligence unit is responsible for, day-to-day operations, collecting intelligence about, violent crime and all other kinds of matters that are going on in the city. They're out searching for, individuals who are wanted for violent crimes. They have a lot on their plate. So I can't say how long it would take them to do that research.
I don't get it. That we just don't have it at your fingertips. I'm really stunned by that you don't have it at your fingertips. Because certainly you're going to have it if you do somebody's going to have to produce it if you do a study, because it's not like who you hire is going to walk around looking for them around the city, right? So we definitely need to get that information. I look forward to seeing it, hopefully in April. Let me ask the Alderman from the 16th about the allocation. So the 2.4, I'm a type of guy that don't like to put short pants on employees and directors. Is it your intent that this 2.5 million goes to the Real-Time Crime Center and they specifically use these funds for camera upgrades or whatever it needs to make their office more effective and efficient, which would include a study?
Yes, the answer to that, Alderman, is yes. I think the virtue here is to earmark resource for the Real-Time Crime Center. Cash is fungible. We know these are ARPA dollars, so they certainly need to be extinguished by 12/31/25. I think the intention would be, yes, if they need to hire some third-party help to help them with some analytics and being more strategic, that's what this can do.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that.
Sure.
That was just my thought, but I want to ask for clarity. Chief, when we look at placement of cameras, because over the past decade, aldermen have used their capital money to kind of get that program up and going. It was based on, I think, district commanders' needs assessments, or, so they just kind of went out there. There was no plan done when we first did this. I mean, the district kind of knows where the hot spots, if you will, intersections are, and we funded them and we placed them there. I'm going to talk to Dr. Isom offline because I'm just a little bit confused. I don't want to, hold everybody here, because I definitely support the bill. I definitely support the police and these efforts. I know we've gotten a lot of violent offenders off the street with this technology. It's been extremely useful. I know there's been pushback years ago, but at the end of the day, it's indisputable about what we can do and accomplish to make our citizens feel safe by having these cameras. So with that, I am going to, fiber. I'm sorry. So a certain portion of the 2.5 million you're looking at to do fiber, new fiber. I think someone asked a question earlier, but I forgot. Is it new fiber or we're upgrading fiber?
Both.
Both? Okay.
Could be both.
All right.
Could be both.
And
I think, I'm sorry, just to address that, Mr. Chairman, if you please me. I think we will find that when we start working in concert with the streets department, they have a lot of this area mapped of where fiber needs to go, where fiber is dark and just needs to be lit, to address some of those areas and blocks that both the Alderwoman from the 27th and the Alderman from the 25th brought up. So I think as we move forward here, you know, I think it'll go pretty swiftly, working in connection with the streets department and any third party help that the real-time crime center at the intelligence unit has.
Alderman, you recognize to close on Board Bill 206.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing really more. I think a lot has been said. I want to appreciate both the chief and Dr. Isom's time, and Paul Payne for hanging in there, even though there were no technical questions around this funding. I appreciate everyone's time here today. I know everyone has valuable time constraints, so appreciate that. I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. I'll close.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill 206.
So moved. We passed Board
what's
Bill
the-
206 out with the do pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
It's
Excuse
been
me.
moved. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
That was 206 committee sub.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I moved that we pass out Board Bill 206 committee substitute with the do pass recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection, Board Bill 206 committee substitute comes out of committee with a do pass recommendation. Next board bill before us is Board Bill 208, sponsored by Alderman Bosley. Madam Clerk, would you read the summary, please?
Board Bill 208, introduced by Alderman Brandon Bosley. This board pertains to the creation of two funds to assist the city efforts to support African Americans who have been victims of the effects of slavery. It authorizes the comptroller to establish the reparation funds to help provide needed support and financial assistance to spouses and children of all African American local residents as of the effective date of this ordinance, and establish the Midwest Land Development Fund to provide additional dollars for economic development at approved local city blocks. It contains a severability clause.
Okay, Alderman Bosley, you recognize on Board Bill 208.
All right, thank you once again, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. This is once again just a simple bill, just setting up a fund, nothing more than just a fund. You know, last time there were conversations about, well, I'm just, once again, this is all about just particularly setting up a fund. I think we just voted out a bill where there was absolutely no plan, particularly on how we're going to implement things. We've done that on multiple occasions with a lot of other things. This is just simply setting up a fund, giving this giving individuals who would like to donate the ability to put some money aside into a pot for individuals in the city who have been victims of slavery. The city has a long history of laws that they have created that have created a lot of divides in between us as residents. So, with those things being said, we talked about this for a long time last week. I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for questions for the committee.
I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill 208.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we pass out Board Bill 208
with
a due pass.
Okay, it's been moved. We have a
Second.
second. Been moved in second. Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objections, Board Bill 208 comes out of committee with due pass recommendation. No resolutions. Any members of the committee, you have any announcements or comments, just raise your hand. I'll recognize you. Okay, seeing none, we will consider the Housing, Urban Development and Zoning Committee hearing for March the 1st, 2022 adjourned. Thank you, everybody.